Family. It's an opportunity for ADACI now to share a collection of a few of the altars that we sisters have created over our nearly 30 years of being together. These altars, of course, as you well know, have been designed to help you contemplate, to create, and to experience the healing powers of the altars and the process of building one. A central part of ADACI's tradition has been the creation of ancestral commemorative altars, which are artistically created, but they are sacred spaces and they serve as memorials to our ancestors. These sacred memorials present a more cultural, spiritual, and contemplative environment by which we can access the power of our ancestors. As you look at these pictures of the various altars, please note that they have been created for various reasons, for various organizations, and for various ancestors, some living and some departed. The altar and the altar building is an ancient African tradition. That's part of a way of venerating our ancestors. And through the construction of an altar, which is simply a physical area in our environment serving as a focal point where we can express our feelings and our emotions within a sacred space. It's a place where we let the ancestors and the world know how much we value our connection to our ancestors, to spirit, to the divine. In the most ordinary sense, an altar is a place where an assortment of special objects is arranged, and we arrange them for purposes of focusing our spiritual energy. Various kinds of ceremonies and celebrations have been used where, in constructing an altar, the altar itself can be transformative. And it's transformative in that the altar itself and putting it together and putting our energies together and our spirit together to design the altar, we give meaning to our daily lives by bringing us back to the divinity within ourselves and reminding us of our connection to each other and to the divine creator. This tradition, which began in ancient times, is universal and can be seen in virtually all cultures and religious expressions. For example, going to the altar is a common feature of the Black church tradition, where members come down to the altar to say special prayers, to be closer to God, to receive blessings and direction, and to be able to continue their daily lives and their daily experiences, to receive the help that they need, that going to the altar provides for them. So, in looking at the construction of an altar, allow me to help you to be able to think about creating your own. Because an altar can be as simple or as complex as the person who is constructing it desires it to be. But the basic elements of an altar are white fabric, a clear glass of water, white candle or a votive, a potted plant or a vase of flowers or fresh herbs, and pictures or other remembrances of one's ancestors. These objects are arranged on the white fabric and form the focal point for our prayers, for libation, and for other forms of ancestor acknowledgement and homage. And you might ask why we begin with white fabric, because underlying all the various colors that you see on the various altars that ADACI has created is white fabric, because it forms the foundation of the altar that we're creating. The white fabric is selected not because the color is looked at as pure, but because white is a non-color. It has no color, therefore no energy in it, and thus most closely represents spirit. The glass of water that's placed on the altar is one not only to just calm the energies around us, but also to help us to be able to relate to water as our primal energy, the giver of life. The candle or the votive provides the light to guide our ancestors to this place where we meet. And the potted plant or vase of flowers represents life, the continuation of life that flows from ancestor to us and from us to our future. And the pictures and the other remembrances that we place on the altar are there to remind us of those we are asking to come to support and to help us. How did ADACI become involved in building altars? Well, it started with ADACI hosting programs and needing support for the success of those programs. And so we created an altar as part of our program and kind of set it over on the side. But over time, the altar became part of the community programs that we were doing. And because they were community altars, which we still do, we invite people to bring items and to place them on the altar wherever they felt that they would be able to go. And what happened? People brought items. Some prayed after they put the items on the altar. Some cried. Some just sat and looked at the altar. And we began to look and realize that the altar had restorative powers. And thus, the trauma that we experienced in the past as our ancestors, and that we continue to experience each and every day as Africans born outside of Africa, the altar became a place where some of that trauma could be released. When we sisters have conducted altar building workshops, the altar building has been as organic as the development of the altars that you see. We noticed that if we invited people to help us construct an altar, they would pick up various objects and place them in particular ways on the altar. And then when we would ask them why they chose the object or why they placed it in the place that they did, they would indicate that the objects, they just felt good. They felt like something that they should do. That the objects expressed for them what they were feeling at the time and what they were thinking. And so we began to understand that this was another form, again, of healing. So over time, as we have built the altars for, as I had said, various kinds of commemorations and for various individuals, ADACI has become known for the altars that we do build. We now are referred to as the altar sisters, the altar ladies, the altar women. And when there is any kind of an event, whether it is a celebration or commemoration of someone who has transcended, ADACI is called and asked to be involved by sharing an expression of that individual or of that particular commemoration through an altar. So as you look at these altars, note that each one of them was been inspired by the purpose for which the altar was created and for whom the altar was being built. Note also that each one is different. Some may look a little similar, but there is not a single altar that is identical to the other. So each altar is special in its own self, carries with it its own special spiritual feeling and sense, and thus helps us to be able to connect our spirit to the spirit of the altar, which in turn provides us again with a sense of healing, of releasing some of our stress, of being able to communicate with the divine, of being able to reach out to spirit and know that spirit is able to reach back to us. The trauma that we have experienced in the past remains within us and has become intergenerational. It has altered our genetic structure and the way that we communicate with each other, the way that we think, the way that we feel. It has affected us physically as well as emotionally. And so all of the various ways in which we can begin to heal from that trauma is extremely important for us as a people. And thus, we offer the sacred space for communication, for connection, for spirituality, for reinforcement, for rejuvenation, for renewal, for re-energizing, for upliftment, and most importantly, for love.